This workshop is workshop number 10. We have a series of workshops that pertain to digital transformation of the Egyptian economy. We started this a few months before, perhaps since February. The purpose of holding these workshops is to support the ongoing governmental efforts to complement digitization of the Egyptian economy in a proper manner to fulfill the desired goals without any stumbling blocks. The efforts of digitalization are serious efforts, but they are incomplete. Simply taxes. If you pay the taxes, it will be through banks. This is what has been directly requested by the tax authority, but they can't pay in cash. They have to go to the bank. Then they have a receipt and go to the tax office to deliver the receipt. As Actor Al-Qusri said, that these are incomplete efforts, imperfect efforts. This is one of the causes that urged us to hold a series of workshops on this issue. The workshop started first by horizontal sector, the experiences of other countries. Then we considered some horizontal issues like the regulatory framework of this sector, the infrastructure, soft and hard infrastructure, and governance as well. We consider the information aspect and secrecy of information. In all cases, we pose the same question. What are the government initiatives in this respect? What are the best practices and where's the gap? What are we supposed to do? So the purpose of this exercise, once completed, to come up with a well-defined agenda on what the government is supposed to do. And if anyone is to invest in this sector, digitization, he would be able to identify the fields or domains of investment. And the partner is the Ministry of Telecommunications and Ministry of Planning. They have been with us, synergizing with us from beginning to end. This is the horizontal aspect. After that, we posed during summer, and this is the first workshop after the 9 previous workshops. These are technical workshops that address specific sectors. We start with the financial and banking sector, banking sectors and non-banking financial institutions, which are vital importance. So the non-banking financial institutions. This is the first sector we start with. They have 2 sessions. First, we focus on the banking sector, and then the non-banking financial institutions. For those who come to the center for the first time, we have a well-defined strategic orientation in our work. We seek to combine between social justice and economic competence and efficiency. They are indivisible and inseparable. So we are not going to talk about strong economy that serve a minority or distribution of poverty. What we seek is genuine sustainable development. That's only through the combination of these 2 aspects. This is the orientation of the center and all the work which is applied research, policy-oriented research, parts of our work. And digitization is instrumental in this respect. Before starting this first session that pertains to the banking sector, I'm indeed pleased to have with us Mr. Ahmad عيسى, CEO of Retail Banking at Commercial International Bank, the CV of Mr. Ahmad. CEO of Retail Banking Sector, and he is a member of the executive committee of the bank, and he was the chief financial officer, and he was in charge of strategic planning at CIB, and he is the CEO of Falcon Group, and he chairs, the Banking and Finance Committee at CCAM, and he has MBA from North Carolina University. This indicates that with your presence, you represent the CIB as well as the whole banking, the entire banking sector. This is a huge responsibility. And AmCham, you're chairman of the AmCham committee, so you still represent them. We have with us Engineer Samir Sheikh, CEO for Information Technology Transformations, Agricultural Bank of Egypt. This greeting to the Agricultural Bank of Egypt. He had leading positions in Kingdom Saudi Arabia, Doha, Qatar, and other countries, and he was CEO of Information Technology Information at several banks in different countries, and CIB, and the CEO and operational manager of National Bank of Kuwait, and he is a board member in several corporations, and he has a bachelor's degree in electronic engineering. This is not a random choice or selection of speakers. This is on purpose. So who would represent commercial banks? We consider digitization from a governmental perspective. But what the government do in this sector has a direct impact on non-governmental or bank. We are supposed to have representative of the National Bank of Egypt and the CIB, but Mr. Ahmed shall represent the entire banking sector. Agricultural Bank of Egypt is specialized outstanding bank. It's one of the banks that outreach to the farmers. 40% of population in Egypt work in the agricultural sector. This sector outreach to this segment is the only bank that has branches nationwide in the different districts, villages, and hamlets. So with digitization of paramount importance, it has to be done adequately in order to fulfill sustainable development and benefit all. I would start with Mr. Ahmed. And no time frame, no outline, but we would have to answer the three questions. The governmental efforts in the banking sector, is this appropriate or there are missing issues? And how this impact the non-governmental banking sector, the best international best practices. Sir, you have the floor. Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for attending this workshop. Hopefully it would be useful and beneficial to all. The digitization or digital transformation in the private or even public sectors, the main goal is to have a banking experience for clients in order to have economically have access to their accounts, matter that they serve their interests through an experience that's far from being cumbersome. So the client is not supposed to spend half a day in the bank to do certain transaction or take 2 days to do so. IT helps in digitization enables banks to provide a banking experiment that would serve the interest of people in an affordable manner. Hence, digital transformation essentially aims to serve the client or customers and improve his own transactions. But this is supposed to be in economical, affordable manner. The main issue we face in digitization in any industry or any country is economic in nature. Would the marginal profit as a result of investment in technology that would lead to digitization, would this incur a return on investment? Would there be revenue or would it be cost effective that would have appropriate return on investment? This is usually one of the issues we consider in CIBs. We started this many years ago. We consider this that any step to be taken has to ensure a proper and appropriate banking experience for the customer, to cost-effective, saving time, but to ensure the sustainability of the service and investment. This has to be done in a cost-effective, economical manner, and to have the return on investment with respect to equity. In Egypt, up till now, there are challenges that pertain to the 10 million Egyptians who would have entered the non-banking financial institutions. What are the investments that these institutions and banks are supposed to provide to build an infrastructure that would enable the institutions to serve the 10, 20, or 50 million Egyptians against the return on investment in infrastructure? So far, experience indicates that investment in infrastructure for digitization is lucrative and profitable, and we are able to realize returns and proceeds due to the customer's confidence. It's known that the deposits at CIB are less than other banks in the market. Our market share is on the rise because the investment in digitization of the bank. We note that the customers are willing to accept a less interest rate on the deposit and higher on the loan if they would provide an outstanding banking experience that's through digitization. We have this economic motivation. The second point pertains to the following next steps. The whole world, where they had taken some strides on the path of digitization, as said in English, we haven't scratched the surface yet. We have a long way to go. In the whole world, there is a long way to go with respect to digitization. We did not miss a lot, but others have preceded us. Europe in 2015, they had a set of regulations, PSG2, and they came into effect last September, a month and a half ago. The banks have been driven by these regulations for the past 4 years. These regulations pushed the banks to open their infrastructure to what's known as fintech industry in order to shift to open banking. During the 4 years, the European banks started to get ready for this phase, and this led to a hike in the fintech companies and an increased investment in fintech companies, as well as an increase in the benefit for the European citizen from the regulations that led the banks to establish the so-called open banking. Open banking is substantive worldwide. The European banks had taken long strides in this respect, and this may represent a risk in the future. Europe is the continent that talked about the protection of the information of the clients. We know the EU directives, GPRD, GPGR. The continent that developed this GPRD, it's developed the PSD2 that pushed banks to open their databases to the fintech to serve the clients. A simple example. When you have access to CIB internet, which is highly developed, you would be able to track the movements of your credit card. However, if you have a question on one of these movements, you have to contact the call center. So we go back to your example, which is the receipt that I have to hand over to the tax authority. In Europe today, you can click on the chart on the bank operation. The bank system shall take you to the system where this operation took place. So you would be able to, follow your receipt in Uber or Carrefour and the map of this route on Uber. This requires that the bank and Uber or Carrefour or any other entity exchange information about you in aggregate format. Under this regulation, PSD2, in the manner that will enable the bank to serve the customer in a better manner and enable the customer to have a better banking experience instead of communicating with the call center. Now the information is available through the mobile phones. Europe is a good example of regulation-driven digitization. There are other markets where this digitization is not regulation-driven, but through those who deal in the market, like the USA and some Latin America countries in Latin America. So the dealers in the market through the CSOs could agree together on a set of standards, apply, and then move forward. These are the countries who do not believe in regulations or the role of regulations, and where there is a governing capitalist thought. Europe, because it's more socialist, so regulation is rather highly adopted and favorable. Digitization, we go back to the first point. It has to be driven by an economic motives and factors, and the ultimate goal would be a better practice for the customer to follow. Let me remind you, when they had the MP3 players or Walkman, it was not prevalent. When Apple was able to transfer this to iPod, it became in vogue because there was hard to use the MP3 player, but the iPod was user-friendly. So the issue pertains to, in the banking sector, we would be able to produce a banking practice that would convince the customer, persuade him to, instead of using the call center for mobile banking, to use the chat bot, would he use to deal with the machine, to communicate with the machine as if it's human. These are issues that we have to take into account. The third point I'm going to address pertains to the drivers behind the digitization. These have to be incorporated as they call it the ABCD: artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud computing, and data analytics. These four drivers would identify the ability of any policy that pertains to digitization. How far the regulator and the legislator would accept this, because to make use of available what's available in artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud computing, and data analytics, I believe that Egypt requires more time in order to develop regulations that would enable the customers and motivate them, same as Europe, to embrace these 4 drivers and build entities within their own institutions, as well as resources within their own institutions to deal with these 4 drivers. Let me give you an example. Artificial intelligence at the moment is supposed to enable the bank to propose the best optimal product to the customer. When you have access to Amazon through previous use of Amazon, Amazon would suggest some products. The technology used in this to provide this proposal pertains to artificial intelligence, and they are designed to serve your interests, to improve your exercise through Amazon. The use of artificial intelligence is of paramount importance. The machine would there would be self-learning, so next time when the Amazon suggests a certain product and you don't buy, or buy and return, the machine will know this has happened, and the next time when dealing with Amazon, it wouldn't suggest to you or other similar customers the same product again, because of the machine learning and the relation between machine learning and AI. There's a lot of talk about blockchain. Most is hype talk. However, there are applications of blockchain that the regulations and the state have to consider. One of the issues that may lead to a paradigm shift in the cost of business and the economies of financing in Egypt, the use of blockchain in registering property and the housing units. One of the main problems that faces property, leasing in Egypt, that it's rather difficult to register property. We used to learn that property of registration and title deed are essential and holding when it comes to land. So the property we have to consider other tools that would facilitate proving the ownership for the borrowers, to lenders to play the role in but an adequate manner. If not, the customer shall pay highest cost in order to prove ownership. All this shall lead to, saving the cost, and it will be cost effective. Cloud computing in Egypt, though the government is working on this, soon we shall have a robust cloud computing environment that would save a lot with respect to the cost of constructing internal database. The infrastructure to be provided by the government for the different stakeholders to store and save their information in a safer environment. Instead of each company has its own cloud computing, this cloud computing shall save a lot of cost for respect for all stakeholders in the market, and this would have an impact on the cost of service provision to the customer. The last driver is data analytics. I've started the data analytics strategy of CIB in 2015 that cost up till now $20 million. The benefit with respect to the customers is great. That's why our customers have confidence in our services, and they have deposits at the bank, though at less rates than our competitors. Data analytics enabled us to provide for these customers a banking experience that would justify paying the premium pricing. In fact, the policies, national policies, have to take into account these 4 drivers. Some are more progressive than others, When I discussed this with the leaderships in the different entities, they talk about moving to being aware of this and what's taking place with respect to data centers, and this would be of vital importance with respect to cloud computing. I believe this is an overview of the four drivers and why there's a need for why is the digitization beneficial to the customer and the economic institution that shall benefit from digitization. Hopefully, in the forthcoming period, the banking sector shall justify to themselves and the board of directors the need to have this spending on this. There's huge spending, even when it comes to data analytics. There was a lot of funds spent across 4 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Ahmed, for all this complete explanation and the example of Amazon, which it really explains how does artificial intelligence works. I just want to have a question for you. The question that's always directed, the technology in the bank specifically can delete or remove the role of banks because the transactions, because as you said, blockchain in itself, all of them in a closed circuit can do the transactions, and the bank in itself can disappear. And there are lots of discussions that banks, in order to be able to avoid such a destiny, they have to change themselves and they have to cooperate among each others in a very good way, so that will they be able to do this on their own, or the legislator have to do something in this regard? And the difference in this case between the private bank and the public bank. So this is an important point. The other point, the four drivers need a lot of things to be done on as far as legislations is concerned in order to move forward. So which is the most thing that is lagging behind, or what is the most urgent that the government should be doing in the banking sector, or in the bank regarding the regulations or the infrastructure or anything? I mean, what's the role of the government that will enable you to play your role in the right way, and in order to be able to keep up with the technology, so that you can benefit the client and also benefit the development? Because if you are working in a good way, you will be able to benefit the development, because you will be able to complete any other development process. So if the explanation will take some time, we can go back. I prefer that you will answer this quickly. I will say that banks will disappear. There are many industries that have disappeared because no one had ever thought that Kodak will disappear. Nobody would have ever thought that those who travel to the USA and do shopping, today you can, as a result of Amazon, lots of companies have disappeared. Those were large ones, and nobody would have ever thought that they would disappear, and they have disappeared from the USA. But in the meantime, Walmart is still there because it's a company that depends on the stores, and they were able to prove to everyone and to the whole world that they can compete with Amazon. And also, and Walmart is coming back since more than one and a half year. If you see the performance of the share of Walmart, you will find that it's a good example that someone can compete the institutions that are built on a digitized environment. So I can think that the banks that do not develop themselves may disappear actually. And if the industry itself was unable to develop itself and was unable to get ready to what's coming as a result of that, the European Bank, for example, are more open to the fintech, and they are able to present or offer a better banking experience because of their openness to Mons and Revolut and all these different institutions. And I'm sure Mr. Samir will talk about this, because the application protocol interface, he will talk about it and how the banks can do this. But the problem that this takes around 2 to 3 years in order for a bank to get ready to be open to fintech. And I guess if we did not start the industry in Egypt, or the industry in Egypt did not start in Egypt to do this transformation from now, maybe at the medium term, many industries will replace this industry. So it may not be the whole community or the whole society will not need a financial intermediary, but the bank in its own, the way how it looks like now, may not be, or it could be an FRA regulated company. Like Mr. Sharif is here now, so it could be a company also that's regulated by the FRA can replace the banks. So this could happen, and it also be subject to the same standards. So will the regulations start from the regulator or from the legislator, or will they start from the market participants or the industry participants? There are models that are successful in this part or are successful in the other part. So there should be a community dialogue. And I don't know how I can answer this question clearly because I don't know what's going to happen. But for sure, there should be a community dialogue at the level of the leaders so that the decision can be made whether to do it. The legislator will be the driver or the self-regulation will be the driver. The most important thing that's really urgent or that's really lagging behind in the legislation is something related, and I'm sure the government is already doing it, like the digital identity of the citizen. Those are the most important things that can really make a difference in digitalization. And it has also it involves some risks and also some benefits in the meantime. The most important risks is the theft of data or identity theft, as what they call in English. And identity theft is very important because it involves a lot of risks like hacking. Identity theft also is a crime that's widespread in the whole world because of the digitization, but it also has lots of benefits. The most important one is that in order, me in the CIB or any other bank in Egypt, whether public or private sector, in order to give you a banking service, you have to go to the branch, and all the branches, they cost a lot of, like 40 million or 50 million, and there should be an employee who meets you, and you have to sign some papers, and the papers have to be stored in the warehouse, and it has to be kept for 5 years after you closed your banking account in the bank. So all of this is a cost, and this is what you pay as a consumer to the banking service. We should all know that every part of this part at the end is paid by the consumer. The cost of the branch, of the employee, and transferring the papers, and its storing or archiving. So the best thing that should be done, or the most urgent thing to be done, is that there should be a digital identity that allows that the banks will be allowed to use such a digital identity in order to know what's the KYC, because the banks call it KYC, or know your customer, because we can then save the cost if there is this digital identity, and we can really save a lot of costs, so that at the end it's not necessarily that you would leave in your bank account a very large amount of money, so that we can use this money in paying the cost of providing the service to the citizen. So why banks require the client to have a lot of money in the banks? Because the banks earn money from the brokerage in the risks. So from your savings you can cover the service of citizens. So if the cost of serving clients is less, so the balances that should stay in the banks should be less, and then the financial inclusion will take place. So this is a starting point of the financial inclusion. Is the cost of serving the clients will be less, so that the bank can serve in an economical way at a level of low savings. So I guess the PSD2 has a big lesson for the whole world. And what I have seen in Europe during the last 2 years, and especially since September, and all of these things we have to focus on and consider, because the banking experience there became completely different because of this open approach to cloud computing and open banking and exchange of information in an aggregate way that really maintains the confidentiality of the citizens, because all of this information is exchanged between the bank and other institutes be. So maybe Mr. Samir can explain this, the idea of the aggregate, better than me, because it really needs an explanation in how the information can be exchanged without exposing the confidentiality or disclosing the confidentiality, because now it has been proved by reality, and Mr. Samira, I'm sure, can explain it better than me. I don't know how it's done, but maybe he can explain it to me better.